Hello, everyone. Welcome. Good morning and good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. Welcome to our first webinar of the year. Glad to have everyone join us today. And for those of who I haven't met yet, my name is Andrew Chang, and I'm the CEO of New Energy Nexus. Our mission is to support entrepreneurs and drive innovation and build equity in the global clean energy economy. So, really excited for you guys to be here. We have an exciting list of speakers today. This session today is going to be about understanding where climate tech investment in Southeast Asia is heading. And we're excited to ground that in a conversation on fresh, data-driven insights from the newly released Vietnam Climate Tech Funding Ecosystem 2025 report. This report is a result of a joint effort by New Energy Nexus Vietnam, RMIT University, and the Agile Project, and it reflects research into how capital is flowing into climate solutions. Now, beyond Vietnam, we'll also zoom out to look at the broader climate tech investment ecosystem and the dynamics across the Philippines, Indonesia, and exploring what's driving growth, where the challenges remain, and what this all means for Southeast Asia's role in the global climate tech landscape. Now, before we get started, just a couple general housekeeping rules. Just note that this webinar is being recorded. Also, we'll be leaving 20 minutes for Q&A at the end, so feel free to add your questions to the chat box. And I'd like to hand it to the floor to the panelists so they can briefly introduce themselves. Just very brief intros. Tao?
Hi everyone. My name is Thao Tran. I'm the Country Director of New Energy Nexus Vietnam. Been with the organization since 2020. Still seeing a lot of potential growth for the clean energy and climate innovation in Vietnam. Happy to see you all.
Awesome. Thanks, Tao. Deonto?
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Dianto Imam here from New Energy Nexus Jakarta, based in Jakarta. Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Deonto. Awesome. And Brenda?
Hi everyone, Brenda Valerio. I'm based in Manila in the Philippines and I oversee New Energy Nexus here in the Philippines. So nice to see you all.
Awesome. Thanks. This is our rock star panelists and guests, and I will now pass it over to our colleagues in Vietnam to go through the brief overview of the report, as well as the key findings and insights. Over to you, Tao. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Coming together with me, you see on the screen, we have two Tao. So I am the country director who is initiating this report based on the number of database and information we have after many years supporting startups, which is trying to really make sense and make impacts out of the data we have. For Thao Dam, she is the one who lead the report writing. So she'll be presenting this report together with me. Can I have so this is the full report. We have the QR code over here. Please feel free to scan the code for the report for the full report in your convenience. Right. So for the we name it Vietnam Climate Tech Funding Ecosystem is a flagship report from New Energy Nexus Vietnam. Is the initiative from us. So we started it from 2 years ago. We collaborate together with RMIT University and WUSC, the member of Agile Development Project in Vietnam at the moment. The goal of the report is really providing a comprehensive data-driven assessment of climate technology investment activity in Vietnam. It seeks to map funding flows, identify emerging trends, and evaluate structural gaps within the climate tech funding ecosystem, with a particular focus on startups and small and medium-sized enterprises. So there is one question could be, why small and medium-sized enterprises? In Vietnam, the startup ecosystem in clean energy and climate is still a little scattered. So when we are working on our support as New Energy Nexus, supporting the drive and the growth of the ecosystem in clean energy and climate, we don't have many entrepreneurs in the country. So we then make the decision to also support those innovative SMEs in the country to help them grow faster. The report will feature primary data. So for this, majority of data in the report is primary. The report is conducted by interviewing a good number of impact investors, entrepreneurs in the countries, and other stakeholders who also support the growth of the ecosystem. Ecosystem-wide, we covers many different stakeholders components over here, as I shared already, investors, startups, intermediaries, policy enablers across climate tech funding landscape in Vietnam. Action-oriented, so it is really designed to support the evidence-based decision-making by investor, policymaker, ecosystem builders, and so on. We have a lot of conversation regarding this. Throughout the year, we are supporting different startups and talking to different stakeholders, and now we put all the information in one piece of report and analyze it. Next slide, please. Great. Thao Dam, I think this is the part where you come in and lead the conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chị Thảo. Hi everybody, I'm Thao Dam, and I'm very happy to be here today with all the amazing panelists and to support my country director in sharing our beautiful key findings from the Climate Tech Funding Ecosystem Report with all the audiences here. And so I should start by a brief introduction of how we conduct our report, and more importantly, how we define climate tech in the report and also the segments that will be covered in the report. So as you can see here, we have these three key pillars. So first is the definition of climate tech. And then we also focus on mostly the technology solutions addressing climate change and environmental impacts. And those are focused on the two pillars of climate mitigation. So you can see as reducing the greenhouse gas emissions, and climate adaptation, which is the technology solutions that adapt to the environmental changes. And for the technology spectrum, it is honestly endless. But for the report, we focus on those three pillars of hardware, software to like full stack solutions. And for more details, it can be anything from deep tech and IoT, AI, biotech, etc. And for the climate tech segments, we base our climate tech segments on the deal room's definitions, which identified the 7 key segments. As you can see here on the screen, we have from energy transition, farming and food production, circular economy, carbon, the built environment, mobility, and finally, blue economy. Next slide, please. Right. And so for the report of this year, we are very happy to first introduce the ecosystem mapping. And to further understand the ecosystem mapping, we have developed an ecosystem model, which comprises of 4 main components, ranging from first the core of the ecosystem, which are the climate tech enterprises in Vietnam. And then supporting those enterprises are the intermediaries. So it could be the ESOs like New Energy Nexus, and also the academic and research institutions. For the financial providers, which are the third layer, can be banks or funds and investors. And these are the components that are supporting the intermediaries and also the enterprises in providing capital. And finally, the enablers. So for the report, we focus primarily on the local government bodies. Those are the ones that set the regulations, the policies that shape the entire landscape, and also helps create an enabling environment for the whole ecosystem to thrive. Next slide, please. And yeah, because there are a lot of components, but I just want to, I guess, focus mostly on the climate tech enterprises, which again are the core of the ecosystem. And I believe there are some interesting insights from the Vietnamese climate tech enterprises that you would like to know about. And so firstly, for the number of funded climate tech enterprises, we have a total of nearly 80 enterprises that have been funded from the past 10 years. And they are all of the enterprises that you are seeing on the screen right now. And for the segment focus, I don't think it comes at any surprises that farming and food production and circular economy are among the top 2 most famous segments in climate tech in Vietnam. And unfortunately, we haven't yet seen if enterprises in the blue economy section to receive funding. And for the geographical focus, the enterprises scatter in 8 provinces, but mostly more than half of that are based in Ho Chi Minh City. And the top 3 of the funding enterprises are located in Ho Chi Minh City, in Hanoi, and then Da Nang. Okay, next slide, please. Right, and here comes the numbers. And so from the 2024 investments ecosystem, we have aggregated some data, and I think there are some really interesting insights to share with the audience here. And so for the first thing for the 2024 funding, we have reached historic highs, driven, however, by anchor investment. So as you can see, in 2024, we have reached nearly $100 million in funding volume across 55 deals. However, nearly 80% of the funding was coming from one mega deal only, and it was from TechCoop. TechCoop is an agri-tech startup that I think has been founded in Vietnam since 2023. And they have received a total of 70 million in Series A funding in 2024. And that was really, I think, a big news, not just for agri-tech enterprises in Vietnam, but for agri-tech startups across Southeast Asia in general. And so even though that can be seen like a really drastic and also like really drastic high. But however, even if we remove that, you can see this investment trend down there, excluding outliers. We still show that a stable growth of the climate tech funding landscape across like a CAGR of 140% across the recent 5 years. Next slide, please. Right. And so when we do some researching for the sources of financing, we have discovered some really interesting facts for the 2024 investment ecosystem. So for the first thing is the financing shifts. We discovered that even though VC funding still provides the most value for startups in Vietnam, the startups are also considering other funding mechanisms to fund their startups. And most importantly, those are debt, convertible notes, and grants or prize money. And you can see as the increasing share in the total funding volume, it has those funding from the non-equity instruments have rose from more than 4% to over 40% in just 3 years. And other than the non-equity instruments, we have also seen the growth of impact investors. And so just across 5 years, the impact investors' participation has grew 10x. So we only have one in 2020, and 5 years later, it's now become 10 impact investors. I think the number cannot be like way too much, but I think it still have shown such a like interesting and also a drastic change in how the impact investors interest in our market. And for the secondary report, we have discovered 3 types of the impact investors here. We have the dedicated impact investors, and we also have the sector-focused climate investors, which are investing in specific climate-related categories, and also the sustainability-oriented investors. Next slide, please. Right, and so you may be wondering, so in Vietnam, where has the money gone into in the 2024? And so across all segments, energy transition, surprisingly, is the sole engine of growth for climate tech. We did some research, so when we exclude the outlier, the mega deal that you have seen in the beginning, we noticed that energy transition is the only segment to record drastic growth, and the funding have rose 5x compared to 2023. In all the other segments, while the other segments face stagnation. And when we dived a bit further into the subsegments, you can see on the top funded segments on the right, the top 6, 3 of them all belong to energy transition. And we have a quote here from one of our climate investors, Ms. Jessica Ngachan from Climb Capital, to explain why, and how, and the mechanism behind the growth of the energy transition segment in Vietnam. And it's mostly driven by policy first for Vietnam's PDP-8, and also the dropping price of solar prices. And also she also recognized an opportunity in developing an integrated energy management platform that can connect energy efficiency, electric vehicles, and energy storage as the next opportunity for climate tech startups in Vietnam. Next, please. Right. But it wouldn't be complete if without some key barriers, of course. That is, I think, the cons to every ecosystem. We have to have the highs, and we also have to have some lows. And we have identified those three main barriers that we are currently really facing in our investment ecosystem. So the first thing we have to notice is the limited ecosystem maturity. We don't just aggregate numbers from the climate tech ecosystems. We also look at other tech ecosystems in Vietnam to see if there is a gap, if there is some comparison to be made. And surprisingly, when we see the post-seed graduation rate of the general tech sector, so what does it mean is if other tech sectors have received funding post-seed, so like Series A, Series B, Series C, we noticed that 32.2% of the funding of the general tech segment from Series A, Series B, Series C, while climate tech only stand at 11.1% because we only have so far we only have like a Series B as the highest fundraising level of the VC funding, while the general tech in Vietnam we have proceeded to Series C already. And for the next part is the domestic funding. We still remains a thin domestic funding. And for the last year, only 4 VCs in Vietnam actively contributed to climate tech. And also for the bank section, many banks in Vietnam still base lending decisions largely on collateral rather than performance data, which leave a lot of climate tech enterprises, SMEs, out of the funding mechanism. And finally, we have identified also the pressure to demonstrate bankability and impact for founders. We noticed that while impact evidence is critical for the climate tech founders to show, investment committees in Vietnam still make decisions mostly on commercial readiness and bankability. Next, please. Right. But we also identify like other supporting mechanisms because as an ecosystem, the purpose of all the actors in there are to help the enterprises grow and to help the ecosystem thrives. And for the 3 actors in the ecosystem, from banks and intermediaries and governments, they all have really exciting initiatives that support the climate tech enterprises. And I also believe this sets a really foundational core to help sustain the ecosystem. So for banks, for 2024, we have discovered some 5 Vietnamese banks that provided green financial programs for SMEs. So these are precisely the financial programs targeted to SMEs that have the solution dedicated toward climate mitigation or sustainability, or more specific climate tech sectors like energy transition or farming. And we have reached nearly 2 billion in total packet values from these banks. Next is the intermediaries. From 2024, we have 10 new programs across the total of 54 support programs focusing on promotion, innovation, and green growth. And finally, for the governments, we also have an enabling policy environment remain strongly oriented toward energy transition and decarbonization. Next slide, please. Right, and that's actually is that it for the climate tech investment ecosystem in 2024. But there was a really interesting other section in the report that we made last year is that we include a spotlight session dedicated toward the women entrepreneurs in the Vietnamese climatic ecosystem. And here is really brief snapshot of how women entrepreneurs are participating in the climatic ecosystem and also the some key barriers that they have to face, and also the current support that they are receiving from financial providers, from intermediaries. And I want to end this with a really inspiring quote from one of our impact investors, is that if society as a whole provides them with a support system that makes them feel secure, only then can they start thinking about pursuing the passion. And I think this really holds true for not just the women entrepreneurs, but also such a thriving but still nascent ecosystem like climate tech in Vietnam. We really need to keep further strengthen our support system for the SMEs, for the women entrepreneurs, in order to help the ecosystem thrive as a whole. And I believe those are the key findings of the report that I want to share. And I will pass the mic back to Chị Thảo again to just share briefly about the impact that our report has made.
Sure. So the report has we have reached more than newspapers and also more than 1 million views, and a lot of different investors and stakeholders come to us, and they're really looking forward for the new report. So for your information, we renew this report every single year because this is primary data. So we interview people, we get the raw data every single year to do the mapping for the landscape. So apart from all the interest we have from impact investor stakeholders, this report also serves as part of the general report for the government of Vietnam. And we have been supporting to offer insights to the Ministry of Science, Technology, and the Ministry of Finance. And also universities such as RMIT, seeing this report is going to be very useful, not only for their research purposes, but also for the educational purposes where they could share the real case studies with primary data to their training and teaching materials. And our aim is to later on, if we have enough funding, we would love to do a more extensive report for the Southeast Asian region. That's it for the report from Vietnam. I would love to pass the mic back to Andrew.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Tao and Tao. You guys totally.
You are.
This was an incredible, comprehensive report, which, it's so enlightening to understand all the different mechanisms and the levers in the ecosystem, but also seeing where the biggest growth sectors are, and also the fact that circular economy and food production has been sort of a mainstay and baseline for the ecosystem in Vietnam, but energy transition has really kicked up in growth. So great insights there. Keep up the good work. I want to pass it over to Brenda now to talk about the Philippines ecosystem. So thank you, Tao, and over to you, Brenda.
Thanks, Andrew. So for a little bit of context, we also in the Philippines tried to map out the clean energy innovation ecosystem, because this was back in 2024. So since we started our work, we have seen interesting resources, stakeholders, and actors in the space, but there hasn't been a lot of data gathered as to how all these actors really interact with each other, and how does it actually benefit clean energy entrepreneurs and startups. So next slide, please. The report features several resources, and we have successfully gathered a huge number of different actors, events, programs, even policies and initiatives. So you have who the startups are, the research labs, who the universities are offering clean energy or sustainable energy formal courses and programs. We tried to map out the investors and different financing mechanisms, the different networking assets such as incubators, support mechanisms, also, of course, the new energy companies, so who are the players in this sector, and then what the enabling environment is like. So what are the policies, incentives, what are current initiatives of different local government units that can be beneficial or that can be good opportunities for clean energy startups. I'll highlight in the next slide an interesting assessment of how mature the ecosystem is. And this is based off the ecosystem maturity model of another organization. But for here, since the text is too small, apologies for that. But of course, the actual copy is available on the New Energy Nexus website. I would like to focus on three things here. First is funding. So we are at level 2. So not really on the very early stages, but also we're still quite in the builder stage where there's emerging government grants and support from private investments and even increased allocation of funds for R&D. But the interesting thing here is there is increasing support for the very early stages, for example, like R&D grants. So there's a lot of them. And also for the later stages, so seed to Series A. But we still have the gap for the missing middle. So once they're done through the R&D prototype stage, once they've gotten a little bit of revenue, but they're not yet ready for seed funding, there's not a lot of options for them for financing. And this is where we have a lot of barriers, which you will see later. So that's for money or funding. Another interesting thing here is the fourth dimension on know-how, right? So how knowledge flows within the ecosystem. So I showed you earlier, there's so many resources, so many actors, so many stakeholders, but interestingly, they're not actively interacting with each other. So there's not a lot of engagement. There's not a lot of there's not a lot of knowledge flow from these different actors, which also hinders how startups and how entrepreneurs or innovation is thriving within the ecosystem. And then lastly, quite related to that is ecosystem growth. So while there's limited knowledge transfer, the ecosystem is growing. So we've seen increasing collaboration between non-government organizations, CSOs, entrepreneur support organizations, funders, and even other energy players. But we're still at the very early stages. So we still lack successful case studies to show that the knowledge flow or interaction between these actors are actually succeeding. On my last slide is a highlight on the startups themselves. So a huge number of them are in renewable energy generation, mostly doing rooftop solars, because as a archipelagic country with very high electricity costs, decentralized solar really is the most accessible and best option for many institutions and many consumers for them to use clean energy. So that's why it's very obvious why renewable energy generation also is the highest sector here. But we also have increasing number of startups in energy efficiency. So that includes efficiency management and also related sectors. So another interesting thing here is when you look on the right on the stages of where they're at, a huge number of them get stuck in the prototype to early revenue stage, again validating what we've seen on the funding landscape, where there's this missing middle, that once startups are done with prototyping or done with their R&D grants, they're having a hard time accessing the next pool of funding that will enable them to transition from early revenue to actually scaling. Right. So still, these are things that we're working with the rest of the ecosystem. We're working with the rest of our other friends and colleagues within the clean energy space to address. But we are seeing interesting and promising growth from the first time we did this in 2019 back now in 2024, and we're still seeing a lot of growth in the last 2 years. So I'll pause there, and I think it will be good input for our discussion later, but I'll turn it back to Andrew.
Thank you, Brenda. Amazing. I love the ecosystem maturity model. I think that's a great way to frame where the ecosystem sits and how they connect with one another. I love that. And also, you know, I think in our conversation later, it'll be great to talk about what is it that is needed in the ecosystem to help get those companies from prototype to the next stage. Because I know it's not just in the Philippines that run into this challenge, and it's really about the makeup of the ecosystem in terms of match funding, risk capital, debt funding to actually help companies move to the next stage. So I'm excited to then segue to Deonto. Deonto, over to you to talk about the Indonesian ecosystem. Thanks, Brenda.
Thank you, Andrew. Hi, everyone. Today, I'm going to share with you, unlike my two other colleagues, I'm not going to share with you any results of research, but this is this is the view on the ground of what we have seen and what we are currently seeing in Indonesia in terms of energy transition and inclusion. Next, please. So in Indonesia, we see three sectors that have received more than enough or adequate, or if not more than adequate amount of funding from both domestic sources and international sources. Decarbonization of power and transport sectors, well covered. Coal plant retirement, that's also well covered. Clean energy generation, that's also well covered. A lot of money have been flowing into these three sectors, but we still see some gaps, challenges in terms of clean energy transition, decarbonization, and climate initiatives in Indonesia. That if more attention is being paid to these sectors, then I think the landscape for startups and entrepreneurs in the clean energy sector, in the decarbonization sectors, as well as in the clean technology sectors in Indonesia can further thrive. It is thriving right now, but it's not as dynamic as we think they could be. Next, please. So these are the neglected areas that we think still need some support, both from the government, private sectors, investment organizations, as well as from other stakeholders in the space. This is not to say that there are no initiatives, there are no innovations, startups, and entrepreneurs in this space. It's just that we still see a lot more opportunities that can be explored within this space. But of course, when it comes to these neglected areas, the challenges are also not insignificant, so to speak. Nevertheless, we see that gender equity activities, initiatives, innovations that involving women in Indonesia, they represent a good opportunity for growth, both for startups and entrepreneurs. I think this is similar to what we see earlier in Philippines as well as in Vietnam, that women-led organization, women-led entrepreneurs play a big role in driving the sector forward. It's the same case in Indonesia. It's just that we haven't seen a lot of interest coming in terms of funding, in terms of technical support, in terms of non-technical support for these types of entrepreneurs. Productive use of energy, it's the same thing. I think we see a lot of opportunities here because of Indonesia as island countries, similar to Philippines, archipelago countries with lots of islands. We see that the innovations and entrepreneurship in the productive use areas as the next sector of growth that can be very, very potential. But then again, challenges remains, lack of government support, lack of private money initiatives, a lack of technical supports coming in from other stakeholders. And we think that has to do with the infrastructure challenges in Indonesia. Java is the main island in Indonesia, but when it comes to productive energy use and livelihoods, the use of these products and services lie mostly in the outer islands in Sumatra, Kalimantan, Sulawesi, and eastern part of Indonesia, where infrastructures are not really developed. Access to information is quite difficult. A level of education is not really on par with the one in Java, and so on and so forth. So that makes it quite challenging for initiatives, for startups, for entrepreneurs to develop products and services in this area. Innovation and entrepreneurship and community engagement, I think these are the natural extension of the first two areas, that when you talk about gender equity, when you talk about productive use of energy, then more often than not, you need to involve a community in the development, not only in the development, but also in the deployment of your products and services. And most likely that's one of the reasons why they haven't seen a lot of activities in these areas, because of the challenges in engaging the community, getting them involved, getting their buy-in, also to ascertain their ability, not only their willingness, but ability to pay for production and services. So next slide, please. So this is what we think that can be done. Any initiatives that would like to unlock these opportunities need to think about moving out beyond Java. I think there needs to be some kind of investments to seek out and to develop innovations and entrepreneurial activities outside Java. And we need to be able to build the innovation narratives that somehow, when you talk about energy transition, it's not only about developing infrastructure, but when you talk about decarbonization, it's not about reducing GHG and so on and so forth, but also about job creation, about economic development, about human resource training, about workforce transition, and so on and so forth. So there needs to be a concerted effort to build the new narrative, to get stakeholders to understand that when it comes to all those things, then it's not only about technology, it's not only about infrastructure, but it's about livelihood. Same with gender and equality and social inclusion, that this needs to be weaved into the narrative that by launching this decarbonization initiatives, energy transition, as well as climate initiatives, it's about trying to transform the economy from the ones that is fossil fuel based into clean energy or renewable base. And we need to be able to work with the regulators, of course, local governments, subnational governments, as well as national governments, to be able to unlock and make sure that all these pieces, they work together. So I guess that's it from Indonesia. Thank you. Back to you, Andrew.
Gianto, thanks for that sharing. That's really unique. I heard you. One of the key words that popped out was natural extension, and that A, we got to get beyond Java. B, it's important we talk about technology infrastructure, but even more important is the livelihoods, the job creation, the economic development outside of Java. And that's a really unique perspective, because when you talk about industrialization and green industrialization, you talk about the hard tech. And sometimes the people aspects sometimes get left out of the equation. So I really appreciate you highlighting that, Dianto, the livelihoods, the job creation, the gender equity, the social inclusion, all those are key components in the work that Energy Nexus Indonesia is doing and embedding into the ecosystem. And I actually want to segue that question to Tao and Brenda. Like Tao, you spoke a little bit about the gender equity part of your climate tech ecosystem report. Brenda, you did as well. But what's the sort of weight of infrastructure and technology development versus social development, equity, inclusion? What's that balance like? Is it 50-50, 70-30? Maybe I'll start with you, Tao, if you could answer that.
Sure. So in Vietnam, we are looking at two different angles in the climate tech in general. We're talking about clean energy and climate in general. For clean energy itself, we still have very a small ratio in terms of women working in the field, because majority is engineering and so on, right? We have about 30, a maximum, I would say 25% developed to 30% right now in the clean energy area in Vietnam for women participation in clean energy sector. And for climate, we have about 35 to 40, which is much higher because a majority of so we have a lot of projects in climate in Vietnam. Why 40, 35 to 40? And go back to my report, the two significant areas in Vietnam in climate that we have a lot of development and grants and funding is in agriculture and circular economy, whereas really getting majority of the workforce is women in the agriculture itself, especially in Mekong Delta area, where all the boys and the guys already, go to big city to work, and then women stay back at home and do more agriculture work and agriculture projects. So that's the ratio at the moment.
That's helpful, Tao. Brenda, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think generally it's hard to say what the ratio or percentage is, because from what we see, it's very distinct. So you have your bigger hard tech, really industry focused infrastructure projects that also attracts many of the institutional investors. And then you have on the other end of the spectrum, their community based, a lot of the grassroots initiatives that also attract NGO and international funding. But they're on different like playing fields. So which makes it difficult, for example, for startups who are, or clean energy enterprises or climate enterprises who are kind of in the middle of both. They are trying to disrupt or enter the industry, but also they have a little bit of angle on community grassroots. They're also working with, let's say, women groups or women benefiting associations or organizations who are sitting in the middle, but they cannot access either of them, right? So that's, I think, an interesting distinction. There's funding and money flowing in both of them, but they're very different. Like, you have different actors and players within the hard tech, clean tech energy industry infrastructure, and then you also have a different set of players for the grassroots, community-led, women-led initiatives.
Thanks, Brenda. And Deonta, maybe over back to you. You talked about the broad ecosystem and challenges. Can you share? I know you guys work on a couple initiatives that focus on women, such as the Bali's Women Initiative. Can you tell us a little bit about that program and any other programs that are supporting the gender equity part of your work?
Yeah, sure. Currently, we have a program in Bali focusing on supporting women and youth-led entrepreneurs in Bali. So, and that program has been free. I think this year is 3 years of the third year of the program, and we've seen quite a lot of interest in the program from Bali-based women-led organizations as well as youth-led organizations. But please bear in mind that when it comes to this women-led organization and youth-led organization, these are mostly early stage. These are mostly grassroots based, and very few can be described as market ready. I think it's only 1 or 2 or 3 companies from a cohort of 40 to 50 companies can be described as market ready. And that probably is true in any other areas in Indonesia outside Java. Especially if you go east, then it's even more difficult to find market-ready startups or companies in the decarbonization, clean tech, or clean energy sectors. But I guess that shows that Indonesia is a diverse place. If you are investors with social impact focus, then this is probably the place for you. This is a good place for you to explore opportunities that might fit with your interest. And if you are an investor with focus on market-ready companies, then you might want to focus in Java or in Jakarta, where a lot of entrepreneurs in the decarbonization sectors, in the clean energy sectors, are very active. And even in the higher end, when PE comes into place, I think we've seen a number of transactions already in this year involving those at the top end of the market. So I think the way we see it, it shows that it depends on your positioning. If you're an investor for social impact, there's a place for you in Indonesia. If you're looking for market-ready ventures, yes. And if you're looking for a top-end market, there's probably some opportunity for you as well.
Thanks, Deonto, for making that distinction. It's a very good observation and insight into the Indonesian market. Tao, back to you. Can I ask you about just what programs that are you currently running right now that you're really excited about? And I'd like to hear a little bit more about those programs and how you're measuring its impact and its outcomes.
Well, that's very it could be a very long answer. I'm trying to make it really short. We are having a few initiatives for this year. So we first of all, the report we share, we're gonna continue the report this year. And as you see, the report will capture the database of the year before because it's primary, and we make sure that we have everything ready at the end of the year. So it's continue with possibility of having another angle of workforce in clean energy, and that gonna be finalized later on. And we continue the collaboration with our MIT University to write the report. And so then, and also we will have a accelerator supporting clean energy entrepreneurs in the country, aiming to collaborate with a international, I would say regional program to get more support for our startups in Vietnam, go global. The third initiative will be climate. So last year we did a climate tech showcase in Vietnam with 366 people turn up, and they all really have focused interest in clean energy and climate. So this year we're aiming to organize Vietnam Climate Week. Early September. Would love to share more information when it's finalized. Aiming to have up to 1,000 people, but they have to be the one who really interested in the program, in the climate innovation space itself. And then the fourth initiative is the investment road trip, where we're planning to bring impact investors in Vietnam, help them really scout startups, because we know. So our knowledge is we know startups even to the personal level. We know the founders. We know how they are with their company, with their co-workers and their family and so on, and their business, of course. So we would love to organize this investment road trip together with another partner, which is a VC in Vietnam, bringing impact investor around Vietnam, experiencing the product, the factory, the life of startups in Vietnam, and then it's easier for investor to make decision on investing. And then the fifth initiative we're working on is building a meaningful and significant dynamic one-on-one mentoring network for entrepreneurs in the country. So this is a very ambitious model where we want to go regional after 2 years implementing in Vietnam. Apart from that, we had really successful woman entrepreneur support funded by DFAT last year. It ended in November already. So it's supporting women in Mekong in agriculture and adaptation. And we want to continue that kind of work together with DFAT and together with other partners if we have a chance, because we did creating a lot of impacts. So I stopped here for the programs,
Yeah.
how to measure impact. We're really looking at everything we support already, and we continue measure impacts, continue the support after several years. And the real impact story is when, like yesterday, my startup Bencon called me and say, Tao, thanks to your program Accelerate, we already working with another clean and so Bencon offer air conditioning energy efficiency solution.
Mm.
They're working with a clean energy company, and now they're providing holistic solution for clean solar rooftop and cooling as a service at the same time. And they are finalizing a deal with a customer. It's a long-term deal, offer the two things at the same time. So they thank me. Those are the impact that we're creating, getting people,
That's
getting startup having more growth and development and grants and funding. Yeah.
Tao. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Any more programs, Tao?
Well, it's
Well
a
done.
secret.
Well done.
We're planning more, but
Yeah,
those are the one on the plate already that we're working on.
that's awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome. So we've got lots of programs being run by Tao, very impactful. I want to pass it to Brenda. Any programs that you want to highlight? Talk to me about the impact. Talk to me about some of the outcomes and what the success looked like.
I'm
Sure.
sorry, Brenda, please talk about Shiwun's climate. I didn't mention it.
Yes, that's also one very exciting program that we're running regionally. So I'm working also with Tao, Dianto, and also our colleagues from Thailand. So this is a regional program in partnership with IFC World Bank. And we are supporting 25 women-led climate enterprises from all over Southeast Asia to help them become investor ready and also market ready. So we have exciting entrepreneurs from sustainable agriculture, waste management, energy generation, and energy efficiency. And you'll hear more about them in our upcoming communication materials. But we're really happy with doing this work on a regional focus, and we really hope to do more of these because you really see a lot of distinction and a lot of excitement even from the women entrepreneurs. So hoping that there will be more She Wins Climate Southeast Asia programs in the future.
Yeah.
So going back to the Philippines, we also have a lot of work on rooftop solar, right? Because it's just the most economical, and it's a no-brainer for the Philippine energy infrastructure right now, right? So we have a lot of work on workforce development. So we have New Energy Skills or New Energy Academy. We've trained over 600 solar installers, and we're expanding to over 30 locations here in the Philippines. And we're even expanding that in other countries because this model of having a hybrid training platform where learners can consume the theoretical content online at their own pace and then doing a hands-on practical at a training center near them really opens up a lot of opportunities for them to professionalize their solar skills and even enter the workforce or enter the clean energy space. So we're still doing a lot of that, and also working on subnational movement building in different provinces in the Philippines to really convene local solar installers, help them raise their voices within their local utilities and even their local government units so they can advocate for policies, and they can also become, champions and ambassadors of the energy transition within their communities. So we see that there's so many initiatives on narrative building, campaign building, but we don't see a lot of effort going into the actual frontliners of the energy transition, which are the solar installers doing the solar work within these cities and provinces. So we want to empower more of them. So we've supported over 120 over the last few years, and we are trying to do more every year. So I think those are really exciting things that we look forward to, Andrew.
Thanks, Brenda, for sharing. I know we just have 4 minutes left, everyone. But for any of the attendees in the audience would like to ask any questions, we have time for 2 questions. Also, just know that this session is recorded. We'll be sending the recording to everyone who attended. So, and if you guys also want to reach out to Deonto, Tao, or Brenda, we'll also be including them in the email as well. Checking the Q&A. If no questions, I have plenty of questions, and I'll finish with this. Final question is, if wishes were fishes, what would you want, speaking to an audience of funders or people who potentially have massive impact on your work, what would you want and what would you want to change right here, right now, to have maximum impact in your programs and your goals in your markets? I'm going to put you guys on the spot. Who wants to go first?
I'll take a first start. I think we, all, I'll just maybe be speaking for myself. We've been in the Philippines for the last 6 years, and we've done a lot of different programs and activities. Trying to really understand the ecosystem, understand clean energy entrepreneurs, and what are the roadblocks and barriers to why they're not scaling or why the ecosystem is not thriving as much. So, if there would be additional resources that we can really leverage, that's truly, prioritizing impact and growth for these grassroots, community-based, women-led, and early-stage clean energy enterprises, because I wanted to highlight this because sometimes the resources we're getting have very ambitious and optimistic target results that we don't really get to see within 1 year or 2 years of implementation. So I think that, being patient with the results for the resources or funding that we're getting is something that would really push our work forward.
Thank you, Brenda. Tao?
Sure. So I have a lot of asks, but I'm trying to get only one for now. As it's been really potential and dynamic and interesting initiative happening in Vietnam at the moment. We have new policy from government supporting the growth of entrepreneurs in the countries. We have the new Center of International Finance based in Ho Chi Minh City and based in Da Nang. And even we have those initiatives that offer free tax for entrepreneurs who have their startups in a certain countries and certain cities. And we have more investment and grants coming from other countries to Vietnam. So I see that potentially here, if we can have more incentive from the government with more support from different stakeholders at the same time and better exposure to international market. Because for startups in Vietnam right now, it's not only Vietnam market, but also they are looking at the market in the region. So I hope that we do have more regional work and regional collaborations where we could bring startups all around and make the regional market becoming much more dynamic and active.
Great.
That's my
Thank you,
wish.
Tao. And we'll finish with Deonto.
Yeah, I think the investment sector in Indonesia, when it comes to all these sectors, they are not as dynamic as they could be, and that's because of the difficulties in making sure that the pipeline is healthy. And that in itself is a challenge because the lower you go down the value, pre-seed and so on and so forth, then the challenges are numerous. But it's necessary to keep the pipeline healthy. If we don't do that, then we're going to see less and less investment coming in Series A, B, C, and D. And that is already happening. So unless we do something with the early stages, impact or otherwise, then probably we're going to see less and less opportunities at the top end of the market.
Thanks. Thanks, Deonto. First, thank you guys so much for a fantastic panel. Just to recap, we've got a healthy pipeline in Indonesia. We want to make sure in the Philippines we have more resources being supported for female-led, community-based clean energy organizations, grassroots organizations. And from Vietnam, be able to have more international exposure. There are more and more incentives that are building for entrepreneurs and policy supporting that. But that international exposure, that connection, whether it's regional or international, would benefit. So thank you guys so much for your time today. Thank you for attending. Thank you, Deonto, Brenda, Tao. Again, we'll be following up. And Tao, and the other Tao, fantastic work covering the report. So thank you guys all very much. We'll continue having these webinars every month on different parts of our ecosystem, regionally, sector-wise, regional focus, some of the new trends and insights. So look out for that. And thank you guys. We'll close it here. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.